I should not have kissed her. The moment she woke up in that hospital room, the first thing she asked was my name. The second thing she asked was why my lips had been on hers. The room went silent after that. Her chief of staff froze. The lawyer standing near the door stopped writing. Even the doctor looked at me like he was waiting to hear whether I had just admitted to something unforgivable. Emma Whitmore lay there pale and weak, oxygen tubes resting under her nose, her green eyes locked on mine. "You kissed me," she said quietly, not confused, not angry yet, just certain. I nodded. "Yes." A few people in the room gasped like I had just confessed to a crime. The lawyer stepped forward. Her chief of staff stiffened beside the bed. Someone whispered the word lawsuit. Emma didn't look at them. She kept staring at me. Why? There are moments in life when a man understands that the truth might destroy him, but he tells it anyway. So I answered the only way I knew how. "Because," I said slowly, "you were already dying when I did it." The room fell completely silent. Emma's expression changed. Confusion, fear, then something else, a memory trying to surface. She searched my face like she was trying to find the missing piece of something important. "What happened?" she asked. And that was the moment everything started. Not the kiss, not the hospital, everything. Because 3 hours earlier, Emma Whitmore had been sitting in the backseat of my Lincoln Town car wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And she had been perfectly alive. "My name is Jack Brennan. I'm 38 years old. I drive a car for a living. And until that night, the most dangerous thing I had done in 4 years was teach my daughter Sophie how to ride her bike without training wheels. 4 years earlier, I had been a firefighter. 4 years earlier, I had also been a husband. That life ended in one phone call. A drunk driver ran a red light. My wife Sarah never made it home. After that, everything changed. I left the fire department. The risks felt different when a 7-year-old girl was sleeping down the hall every night. I traded sirens and burning buildings for long, quiet shifts behind a steering wheel. It wasn't exciting, but it was safe. Safe was good when someone depended on you. That night started like every other shift. 3 pickups. 2 airport runs. 1 late-night gala passenger from the Four Seasons. The first 2 were businessmen who barely looked up from their phones. The third one was Emma Whitmore. I didn't know that at the time. When she walked out of the hotel at 11:15, she just looked like another tired rich person escaping a charity event. Emerald dress, heels in one hand. Expression that said she had spent 3 hours pretending to enjoy conversations she didn't care about. She slid into the backseat. "Beacon Hill," she said. That was it. 20 minutes into the drive, she spoke again. "Can you pull over up ahead?" There was a coffee cart on the corner. The kind that survives off night workers and people who aren't ready to go home yet. I pulled over. She stepped out, bought a latte, and came back looking like someone who had finally escaped a long day. For about 30 seconds. Then everything changed. I saw it first in the mirror. The cup slipped from her hands. Hot coffee splashed across the leather seat. Her fingers flew to her throat. Her eyes widened. At first it looked like choking. Then I heard the sound, that terrible wheezing gasp, air trying to get in and failing. I knew what it was instantly. Anaphylaxis. Severe allergic reaction. In the fire department I had seen it twice. Both times someone had an EpiPen ready. This time there was nothing. I slammed the car into park and threw open the back door. "Emma." She couldn't answer. Her lips were already turning purple. Her hands clawed at her purse, desperately searching for something that wasn't there. I dumped the contents of the bag onto the seat. Wallet, phone, lipstick, keys, no EpiPen. She had forgotten it. I dialed 911. The dispatcher was calm, professional. "Ambulance is on the way. Estimated arrival 8 minutes. 8 minutes. I looked at Emma Whitmore. She didn't have 8 minutes. Her breathing had almost stopped. Her eyes were rolling back. I made the decision without thinking. Firefighter training never really leaves you. I tilted her head back, cleared the airway, and pressed my mouth against hers. Not a kiss. A lifeline. I forced air into her lungs. Then again, then again. When her chest stopped moving, I started compressions. "Come on," I muttered. 4 minutes. That's how long I fought for her life in the backseat of a car parked on a Boston street. 4 minutes of sweat and fear and refusing to quit. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedic checked her pulse. Then he looked at me. She's alive. The relief hit so hard my legs almost gave out. They loaded her into the ambulance. I followed it to Massachusetts General without even deciding to. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a plastic chair in the waiting room when my phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. My daughter had stayed up past midnight waiting for me. The picture she sent was a crayon drawing, 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing in front of a house. Dad and daughter, our little family. I stared at that drawing a long time. Then I stood up. I was about to leave. Emma Whitmore had an army of people to take care of her. She didn't need a driver sitting in a hospital waiting room. That's when the doors burst open. Lawyers, assistants, bodyguards, the kind of people who move fast when billions of dollars are involved. A woman in a tailored suit walked toward me. Margaret Lawson, Emma's chief of staff. She thanked me politely, then handed me a stack of papers, a non-disclosure agreement. They thought I might sell the story. I pushed the papers back across the table. I don't want anything. She looked surprised. You saved Miss Whitmore's life. I shrugged. She was dying. I knew how to help. I stood up to leave. That's when I heard a voice down the hallway, weak, barely louder than a whisper. Jack. Every person in that room turned. Emma Whitmore was awake, and somehow she had heard everything I just said. She was asking to see me. I didn't know it then. But that one request was about to destroy the quiet life I had built and change my daughter's future in ways I never could have imagined. When I stepped into Emma Whitmore's hospital room, the first thing I noticed was how small she looked. 3 hours earlier, she had been a powerful presence in the backseat of my car. Elegant, controlled. The kind of woman who seemed completely at home in a world I had only seen from the outside. Now she looked human, fragile. Her dark hair spread across the white pillow. Tubes ran to a machine that hummed softly beside the bed. Flowers had already started arriving, filling the room with color that felt strange in a place like that. But her eyes were sharp, green and steady, watching me. You stayed, she said. It wasn't a question. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Margaret Lawson stood near the window with the same cautious expression she had earlier. Lawyers hovered in the hallway like shadows that didn't quite want to enter the room. Emma ignored all of them. She looked at me like I was the only person in the room. Tell me what happened. So I did. I told her about the coffee cart, the moment the cup fell, the way her hands had gone to her throat. I told her about searching her purse and not finding the EpiPen. I told her about the dispatcher saying 8 minutes. I told her the truth. You stopped breathing, I said quietly. I didn't have a choice. Emma listened without interrupting. Her fingers tightened slightly around the hospital blanket. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. So you didn't kiss me, she said. I shrugged. Depends on how you define it. For a second she stared at me, then she laughed. It was soft and a little shaky, but it was real. Margaret looked stunned. I got the feeling Emma Whitmore didn't laugh very often. Thank you, she said. Not the polite thank you people use when they're following a script, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper. You saved my life. I didn't know what to say to that, so I did what I always do when things get uncomfortable. I told the truth. I was just doing my job. You're a driver. Used to be a firefighter. Something changed in her eyes when I said that. Understanding, respect. We talked longer than either of us expected, about nothing important at first. Boston traffic, the terrible coffee served at charity events, why she hated wearing high heels. But eventually the conversation shifted. People tell strangers things they don't tell anyone else. Maybe because strangers don't come with history. Emma asked about my life. I told her about Sophie. My daughter was 7, blonde hair like her mother, too curious for her own good. The best thing in my life and the reason I had left the fire department. I told her about Sarah, about the accident, how one moment we were a family of 3 and the next it was just me and a little girl who still asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Emma didn't interrupt. She didn't offer empty sympathy. She just listened. When I finished, she looked at the ceiling for a moment before speaking. My father died 2 years ago. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the weight behind the words. Heart attack, completely unexpected. She smiled faintly. He was the only person who ever looked at me and didn't see a business opportunity. That sentence stayed with me. Here was a woman who could buy almost anything in the world, and the thing she missed most was someone who didn't want anything from her. We kept talking until the clock on the wall said 4:15. That's when reality caught up with me. Sophie would wake up for school in 3 hours. I stood. I should go. Emma nodded slowly. I started toward the door. Her voice stopped me. Jack. I turned. What do you want? I frowned. What? To repay you, she said. What do you want? Money, a job, a favor. Those were the answers people usually expected in a moment like that. Instead, I said the only thing that came to mind. You could come visit my daughter sometime. Emma blinked. Sophie loves flowers, I explained. She's fascinated with lilies. She's only seen them in library books. For the first time since I met her, Emma smiled fully. My mother loved lilies, she said softly. Then maybe you could tell Sophie about them. That was it. No contracts, no promises, just a strange conversation between two people who had no reason to trust each other but somehow did anyway. 3 days passed. Life returned to normal, or at least the version of normal I understood, driving passengers, helping Sophie with homework, trying not to think too much about the billionaire heiress whose life had crossed mine for a single strange night. Then the envelope arrived. It was waiting for me at the dispatch office, cream-colored paper, heavy, the kind people with money use for invitations. Inside was a single card. Sophie Brennan is invited to a private tour of the Boston Botanical Garden this Sunday. At the bottom were 2 simple letters, E.W. My first instinct was to throw it away. That world wasn't ours. Private tour and botanical gardens belonged to people who didn't worry about grocery bills. But Sophie found the envelope before I could make that decision. Her eyes lit up. Daddy, are there real lilies there? That was the end of the argument. Sunday morning, we took the bus across the city. Sophie pressed her face against the window the whole ride. Everything fascinated her. Street musicians, dog walkers, even the pigeons outside the subway station. When we reached the garden entrance, Emma was already waiting. She looked different than she had in the hospital, healthy, relaxed, no formal dress, just jeans and a cream sweater. For the first time, she looked like someone who might actually belong in a normal place. Sophie hid behind my leg when we walked up. Emma surprised me. Instead of greeting me first, she knelt down so she was eye level with Sophie. What do you like to draw? Not the question most adults ask kids. Not what do you want to be, not how old are you. What do you like to draw? Sophie warmed up immediately. She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket. A drawing she had made the night before, 2 stick figures, a house, a bright red door. Emma studied it carefully, not the polite glance adults usually give children's art. She really looked. That's beautiful, she said. Sophie beamed. We spent the afternoon walking through the greenhouse. Emma showed Sophie orchids, ferns, and plants from places I couldn't pronounce. When we reached the lily section, Sophie pressed both hands against the glass. White petals opened toward the sunlight. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, simple, like 3 people enjoying a quiet Sunday. That moment didn't last because someone had been watching us. And by Monday morning, a photograph of the 3 of us was everywhere. Front pages, websites, social media. Billionaire Heiress spotted with mystery man and child. The story spread through Boston faster than a winter storm. By noon, my boss called me into his office. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. You understand our clients value discretion. I nodded. You're suspended. Just like that, no pay, no benefits. I walked out of the building feeling like the ground had shifted under my feet. Sophie's tutoring alone cost $200 a month. Rent was due in 2 weeks. My savings would last maybe 6 weeks. My phone rang before I even reached the sidewalk. Emma, I answered. Her voice was shaking. I'm so sorry. She apologized over and over. She hadn't known photographers were there. She said she would fix everything. She said she would make it right. Then she offered me a job. Personal driver, double my salary, full benefits. I didn't even let her finish. No. Silence, I'm not a charity case. That's not what this is. Yes, it is. My voice was calm but firm. I didn't save your life for a paycheck. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. Let me fix the injustice. She didn't offer money. She didn't offer favors. She offered to call my employer and explain the truth, not as a billionaire, just as someone telling the story of a man who had saved her life. I didn't know what to say. People with power usually take things. They don't give them back. I'll think about it, I said, and I hung up, because I still didn't know what Emma Whitmore wanted from me, or why my life had suddenly become the center of a storm I never asked for. 2 hours after I hung up the phone with Emma, my old boss called. I expected bad news. Instead, he cleared his throat and said something I hadn't heard in days. You can come back to work Monday. That was it, no apology, no explanation, but I knew exactly what had happened. Emma Whitmore had made the call she promised. She hadn't threatened anyone, she hadn't thrown her wealth around, she had simply told the truth. A driver saved my life, punishing him for that is wrong, and somehow that had been enough. For a moment I felt relief. Then something else followed it, unease, because getting my job back didn't change the real problem. The city knew my face now. My coworkers knew my name. And people love stories about rich women and poor men. They just don't care if the stories are true. When I walked into the dispatch garage Monday morning, the whispers started immediately. Hey, Romeo. Careful, Brennan. Don't start kissing the passengers. I ignored them. The job was the job, pick up passengers, drive, drop them off, go home to Sophie. But the normal rhythm of my life had cracked. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected to see Emma's name again. It didn't happen. Days turned into a week. Then 2. Emma disappeared back into her world. Corporate boardrooms, press interviews. The kind of life that existed far above the streets I drove through every night. I told myself that was for the best. Our worlds had collided once. They didn't need to do it again. Then one night I turned onto my street after work and saw a black sedan parked outside my building. I recognized it immediately. Emma stepped out when my car stopped. She looked different, not polished, not composed. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were red like she had been crying for hours. She stood there in the cold night air looking lost. I didn't know where else to go, she said quietly. Every sensible part of my brain told me this was a terrible idea. This woman brought chaos into my life. Newspapers, photographers, problems, but I also recognized something in her face. Loneliness. The same kind I had felt the night Sarah died. I unlocked the building door. I've got tea, I said. My apartment wasn't impressive. Small kitchen. Old radiator. 2 chairs at a table that had seen better years. Emma sat down like she had stepped into a different world. I made chamomile tea. The same kind I made for Sophie when she couldn't sleep. For a while we just sat there listening to the rain hit the window. Then Emma started talking. About her Uncle Richard, about the board meetings, about the corporate battle that had been building since her father died. She told me something else too, something that explained the sadness in her voice. Her ex-fiancé had been working for Richard the entire time. Their relationship had been a setup, a corporate strategy. The man she thought loved her had only been trying to get control of her company. When she finished speaking, she looked exhausted. Everyone wants something from me, she said. I leaned back in my chair. Well, I said, you've come to the wrong place for that. She raised an eyebrow. You want nothing. I shrugged. I've got what I need. Sophie. Yeah. And that's enough. It has to be. Emma stared at me for a long moment. Then she laughed. A real laugh. You know, that might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Before I could answer, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy. Sophie stood there in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Then she saw Emma. Her whole face lit up. Flower lady. She ran across the room and wrapped her arms around Emma's neck. I missed you. Emma froze for a second. Then she hugged Sophie back carefully. I missed you too. Jack Brennan's apartment had always felt quiet. Just two people living small, careful lives. That night it felt different, warmer, like something had shifted. Emma stayed until Sophie fell asleep again. When she left, I walked her to the door. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the tea. For listening." I watched her drive away. I should have known the peace wouldn't last. The next morning another photograph hit the internet. Emma leaving my building. 6 in the morning. The headlines were worse this time. Billionaire heiress in secret relationship with driver. My boss called before I even finished breakfast. "You're fired." No suspension, no discussion, just gone. 10 minutes later Sophie's school called. Parents were complaining. They didn't want their children around that situation. They suggested I consider moving her to another school. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. Everything I had built since Sarah died was falling apart. My job, my daughter's school, our stability, all because I had helped someone. Emma showed up that afternoon. I didn't let her inside. I spoke through the intercom. "You can't come here anymore." Her voice cracked. "Jack, please. My life is falling apart. I can fix it. I don't want you to fix it." There was a long silence. Then I heard her crying, "I'm sorry." "I know." But sorry didn't change anything. I stood by the window and watched her walk slowly back to her car. Part of me wanted to run outside. Part of me knew that would only make things worse. Emma didn't give up. 3 days later she called a press conference. Every news station in Boston showed up expecting a scandal. Instead she told them the truth. She told them about the allergic reaction, about the ambulance, about the man who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. Then she announced something else. A foundation. A fund to support single parents struggling to survive. Named after her mother. The Elizabeth Whitmore Family Fund. Jack Brennan's name wasn't used as publicity. But everyone understood who inspired it. Within a week the truth about her Uncle Richard came out. He had been the one leaking the photos. The one trying to destroy her reputation. The board forced him to resign. Emma kept control of the company, but she didn't celebrate. That same evening she drove back to my street. This time she didn't knock, she just stood in the rain outside the building, waiting. I watched her from the window. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the fight had drained everything from her. Finally I went downstairs. She looked up at me. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. "I just wanted to know if there's any chance I could still be part of Sophie's life." I didn't answer right away. Before I could say anything the apartment door behind me burst open. Sophie ran outside barefoot. She grabbed Emma's hand. "Come see my new drawing." She dragged Emma toward the building. Emma laughed through her tears as she followed. I stood there watching them go inside. Maybe life wasn't as simple as I wanted it to be. Maybe sometimes chaos brought the right people into your life. I closed the door behind them, and for the first time in years my apartment felt like something more than a place to survive. It felt like a home again. 6 months later I stood in front of a room full of people wearing business suits and expensive watches. Most of them looked uncomfortable kneeling on the carpet. "Lock your elbows," I said. "Press hard. You're not going to hurt them." If the heart has stopped, broken ribs are the least of their problems. The man in front of me nodded nervously and pushed down on the CPR dummy's chest. "Count out loud," I told him. 30 compressions, then 2 breaths. The room echoed with the steady rhythm of people practicing. It still felt strange standing there. A year ago I had been driving a Lincoln Town car through Boston traffic at 2 in the morning. Now I was running the emergency response training program at Whitmore Enterprises. I hadn't taken the job because of Emma. That had been important. I applied, interviewed, competed against other candidates. My old fire department records helped. So did 10 years of emergency training. But the decision had been made by a hiring board that included people who barely knew Emma. For the first time in months, something in my life belonged completely to me. When the session ended, the employees filed out slowly. One of them paused at the door. "Thanks," he said. "You might have saved someone's life today." I shrugged. That's the idea. When the room finally emptied, I packed my notes and headed downstairs. My phone buzzed before I reached the lobby. A text message. Emma, dinner tonight. Sophie says she has something important to show us. I smiled before I realized I was doing it. Thursday had become our routine. Emma didn't move into my apartment. That had been her decision. This isn't a fairy tale, she told me once. We build things slowly. So every Thursday she came over for dinner. She learned to cook simple meals, burned rice more than once, set off the smoke alarm twice. Sophie loved every minute of it, and slowly, carefully, Emma became part of our life, not as a billionaire, not as a guest, just Emma. When I got home that evening, Sophie was already waiting by the door. She grabbed my hand and dragged me toward the kitchen. You're late. It's 5 minutes. That's late. Emma stood at the stove looking both proud and terrified. I made pasta. I looked at the pot, then at the smoke detector. Should I call the fire department? She pointed a wooden spoon at me. Try it first. Sophie giggled. Dinner was loud, messy, perfect. After we finished eating, Sophie disappeared into her room and came back carrying a piece of paper. I finished it, she said. She handed it to Emma. It was a drawing, crayon and marker, simple but careful. 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. A tall one, a small one with yellow pigtails, and a woman with brown hair standing between them. Flowers surrounded the house. Lilies. Emma stared at the drawing for a long time, her eyes filled with tears. You added someone, she whispered. Sophie nodded proudly. You. Emma looked at me. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She already knew. That night after Sophie fell asleep, Emma and I stepped out onto the small balcony. Boston stretched out below us, streetlights glowing, cars moving through the night like quiet rivers of light. Emma leaned against the railing. Do you ever regret it? Regret what? That night. You could have just waited for the ambulance. I thought about it for a moment. The cold street, the backseat of the car, her lips turning purple. No, I said, I'd do it again. Even knowing everything that happened after. I nodded. You were dying. And the kiss. She looked at me sideways. That wasn't a kiss, I said. That was CPR. Emma smiled. And now? I stepped closer, took her hand. Now, I said quietly, this is. I kissed her again, slow, gentle, nothing like the desperate breath I had forced into her lungs that night. Inside the apartment, Sophie turned over in her sleep. The drawing hung on the wall beside her bed. 3 figures standing together in front of a house with flowers growing all around it. A father, a daughter, and the woman who had somehow found her way into their lives. Emma rested her head against my shoulder. The city hummed quietly around us. For years, I had believed my life had ended the night Sarah died. But life has strange ways of continuing. Sometimes it begins again in the backseat of a car. Sometimes it begins with a child's drawing. And sometimes it begins with a kiss that wasn't meant to be one. Emma looked up at me. Funny thing, she said softly. What? You saved my life that night. I shook my head. Not exactly. What do you mean? I looked toward the bedroom where Sophie slept, then back at Emma. You saved ours too. She smiled, and I realized something then. Some kisses bring someone back to life, but the rare ones start a whole new life. He stayed, and that changed everything.